Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masech the Zevachim daf Tzadi Beis. We are going to begin on Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph with the new parak Mishnah. Dam chatas. So when it comes to the dam, which comes from a carbon chatas, shenitas al habeged, and some of the dam splashed onto the garment of the kohen, harizet toin kibus. So it's necessary, before the zrika is actually performed, that you must do kibus, you must wash this garment. Even though the truth is that the pasuk that discusses this requirement is specifically referring to something which is in Shenemar b'makom kadosh te'achel. It says the place where it is makom kadosh you should eat. And this is the whole pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'kayin hamachati yoisa yoichlena b'makom kadosh." So you should eat it in this holy place. Ti'achel b'chatzer omayid. And it says specifically, the pasuk is talking about in the makom, in the oil mayid, and it's talking about while he's eating. Kol asher yigab b'sara yikdash. Anyone who touches the basar will be kadosh. Yasher yaz midama. And it says anyone in which the blood is on the beged, then it says techabis b'makom kadosh. So the pasuk really is talking specifically about the time or a type of carbon which is eaten. B'makom kadosh te'achel. Echad hanechalos. So we say, but it's not only talking about a carbon that is eaten. The echad hapenimius. Even when it comes to chatas hapenimis, which is not eaten, to unos kibus. Nonetheless, that's also necessary to be eaten. Shenemar, because the pasuk also says, in also in Vikra Vav a little later, Dabril Aron Velban of Lamar Zos Taurus Achatas, B'makam Asher Tishached Oil Tishached Achatas Hashem Kodesh Kedoshim He. So it says Tauras Hachatas. So these are extra words. So Torah achas l'chol achatais. It's coming to tell you that no matter what the chatas is, whether it's a chatas hachitzayna, which the kohanim eat, or the chatas panimis, it doesn't make any difference. The dinim are the same, and therefore, if there's dam that falls onto its beged, so then the din is that it must be washed. Let's look at question 13. There's 4 parts. We're only going to see 2 parts right now, I think. Be'elu chatois dalholan shenitas medaman al beged toin habeged kibus ve'elu ein toin kibus. So the first one is chatas penimis. So our Mishnah said that it does need. Chatas chitzayna is seemingly even more of a davar pasha, that it's toin kibus. Okay. The third one is going to be hayla shas hakaysher v'nifsala, and the fourth one's going to be chatas oif. So we'll get to that soon. We're not going to see the answer yet. We'll see the Mishnah. So, the Mishnah says chatas psula. Chatas psula. Let's say I have a carbon chatas that is apostle. Ein damotain kibus. Then the din is that if the dam goes onto the beged, no, you don't need to wash. Now, ben shahaisa lo shasa kaisher, ben shalo haisa lo shasa kaisher. It doesn't matter if it had a time which was actually kosher. It was always a problem. So why would we say that that's not required for us to wash? Because Rashi says, Asher yaze baroil hazokas medaber. It's only something which is fit to sprinkle. So the blood which is on the beged, that was supposed to be sprinkled, and therefore it's problematic that we didn't sprinkle it, and therefore you have to wash the garment. Which is mashma, if you have a chatas psula, then in that situation it would not be good. So now the answer is going to be it's a machlokas, but ha'isala shasa kaisher b'nifsala, according to our Mishnah, it seems pretty clear that ein damato in kibos. Okay, but we'll have to see. That one holds like that. Ezuhi Ezuhi Shaisala shasa kaisher. What's an example of that? For example, shilwana. Let's say that the dam stayed overnight, which pasaled it, but before it was fit to be sprinkled, but then it became pasal, or vishin nitma, in the event that it became tamei uvishiyatzis, so or went out. So before those things happened, it had a shasa kaisher. Ve'ezu hishol haisol shasa kaisher. Shenishchat chutz lizman chutzim kaima. If you shechted it outside of its time frame or the proper place, so you had this improper machshava, so that passes it from sprinkling it. The shekibu psulin as dama, or let's say someone who's a apostle who did the Kabbalah Saddam, so that makes it immediately not fit for the Zrika. Okay, and therefore you would not need kibus. Okay, now let's see the Gemara. Dam chatos, parentheses, shemes v'chol, v'i Torah achas v'chol chatois. If it's true that we're saying that the din is the same when it comes to every carbon chatos, and therefore every carbon chatos would require kibus, even the chatos panemius, afil chatos oiv nami, then apparently we should say the same thing by chatos oiv, which again is question 13d. So, okay, why not? Well, alamatanya yochli hey dam chatos oiv toin kibus tomalum rezois. So apparently we have a xeris akasu. This extra word zois is telling ein toin kibus, and everyone holds like that. That's the answer. Okay. Now when it comes to for some reason, even though it's the same thing, it's also a chatas, but it's not a behemoth, it's an oif. For some reason, we use the word zois to exclude it. So Amr Shlachish B'Shamar Kapara, Amr Kra, the pasuk says tishachet. So it says you should shecht it. Obviously, it's talking about b'neshachtais hakas medaber, only something that's shaykh a din of shchita, not including an oif, which is malika. So since the pasuk says, as we said before, the pasuk explicitly says, let's just find it quickly. It says, it says by zois chatos, which was a riboy, then it says b'makom asher tishached oisa, the place where you shecht it, the oila. That's where tishached chatos. That's where you shecht the chatos. There's no shchita when it comes to an oil set oif. So therefore, chatos oif. Also, but we're talking about chatas, so it doesn't need kibus. So it couldn't be a riboy, and it's again, it fits beautifully if you look at the whole pasuk. Teres chatas is a riboy of all chatois, but it's only b'makam asher tishachin oil tishach chatas. It's only by shchita, but not by malika. Okay, and that's l'divrei koil, and that's the answer. Now the aima, why don't we say it like this? B'nechalos hakas madaber. Maybe the pasuk is only come to include things that are eaten. Why does the Mishnah say, and this is l'divrei koil, also on the other side, that when it comes to chatas panimis, the din is that we say it does need kibus if the blood gets on the beged. But why? It's not nachalois. Maybe we should exclude it because it's not the same thing as the chatas chitzayna. And the pasuk also says over there, it says the language of achila. It says, as we also quoted, it says, "Hakoyin hamachati yisa yoichlena," says you'll eat it. So apparently, maybe it's something to exclude something which is not eaten, like the chatas hapanimis. So now, Rabbi Rachman is Tainas. As we said, teres chatas comes to include chatas panimis. Do you hakin feel chatas oiv nami? So why don't we include? Based on says teres chatas to include the chatas oiv. No, you can't do that because me and Rachman is Zais. So Marisa. So understand, there's a pasuk which includes, there's a pasuk which excludes. So why are we specifically targeting, if you will, that language, the chatas oiv, to say no, that's excluded. But when it comes to chatas panimis, it's included. But why? So mistar the chatas behema panimis habilei riboy, and it has many things which are the same thing. The chatas panimis are very similar to chatas chitzayna, and I believe in 7 ways. Let's see what they are. Shechein behema, obviously. Both of them are animals as opposed to a bird. Shchitas, suffering. First of all, or I should say, second of all, there's a din shchita, and it's not malika, and it's besuffering. So, as That's what's required. The kabbalah's kli, you're makabel the dam in a kli, and let's just read the Gemara. Then we'll go back to the Rashi. You'll just see the words on Amud Beis. The Karen, the Etzba, the Chuda, the Ishim. Okay, so let's go back in Rashi. So the Kranas Mizbeach Kamaisa, the corners, the Keneged Chuda Shel Karen, it has to be by the corner. Exactly what that means is it exact. It's different sheet as we saw. Uve Etzba, and we do a blood application with a finger. The Ishim, and it's put on the Mizbeach as a fire offering. Specifically, the Ishim Emurehem Ishim, that its sacrificial parts are burned. Avu Oaf, Eino Behema, Eino Nisht, Eino Shaichet, that's 2. Eino Toin Safain, it does not require the sheet to be in the north, that's only by Behema, of Kachi Kadoshim. The Kabbalah, we don't do Kabbalah Saddam in a Kli. V'lo Karen, why not? Shari Chatas Oif, Lamat Danasis. Because when it comes to the Chatas Oif, the carbon Chatas, the blood applications are on the top, above the Chutta Sikra. The Chatas Oif is on the bottom. And we don't use our finger when it comes to the blood applications of a Chatas Oif. And it doesn't have any sacrificial parts from the bird that are burnt up on the Mizbeach. Okay, Sadi Beis, Amud Beis, as we were just before. So why are we doing that? We're listing all these similarities to say that if we're going to include something, it makes more sense to include the Chatas Penimis and not the Chatas Oif. So Gemara says, Adra b'pumfa kert. Maybe Chatas Oif have a little riboy. Shechein chutz kamaisa v'yachil kamaisa. So what is this? First of all, it's outside. It's chutz mechutz. We're letting out. They're both done outside, not inside the kodesh. And also, the kohanim eat it. The chatas penimis are not eaten, but the chatas chitzonis is eaten, and so is the chatas oif. So hanach nefishin. We're better than you. We're more than you. 7 is better than 2. Okay, quantity over quality, which doesn't always work, but that's one teretz. Rav Yosef Omer Kra. Actually, if you look in the pasuk, it's pretty clear that this is the answer. It says Yochlena Lazu V'lo Lacheres. So the pasuk says Hakoyin Mechati Yisa Yochlena. You'll eat it. So it must be coming to exclude something else that is eaten. So, and that's excluding the Chatas Oif. Even though it's eaten, it's not in the category. But Nechalois Mir HaKosov. So it's talking about something that is eaten that the pasuk is excluding. Must be the only other thing that's eaten that's a chatas other than your typical chatas chitzayna is chatas oif. Even though it's eaten, it does not require the dam to be removed from the doesn't need kibbutz. Vel zois lamli. So if that pasuk is coming to exclude the chatas oif, so why do you need zois? Zois, we said, is what excludes oif. So ilav zois, it wasn't for that other pasuk. Havamina yachlena urchidikra kamashmo. And you would think maybe there's the word yachlena, maybe it's not necessarily a drasha, but once you now have the word yachlena, that kind of helps substantiate to kind of explain why one miyat is better than the other. Okay, because zos is definitely extra. So the zois achatas, which is definitely a riboy, but maybe you'd say, well, which one are we coming to include or exclude, I should say. So therefore, that's the purpose of it. Rabbi Omer Kra, he has a different shot. He says the pasuk says Asher Yaza, that you will sprinkle it. So b'hazois a custom adaber. It's only something which is shayach hazah. So look in Rashi. It's really not a question because ikar kibus bepenimius ksiv. The pasuk is actually talking about a karma which is done inside. The asher yazeh, the talking about sprinkling the ziyas custom adaber behind bepenimius ksiv. Behen hazah al haparayches. When it specifically talks about the chatas penimis, that's where the sprinkling takes place inside, by the parayches, on the curtain. So the pasuk gufa is talking about penimis. So it's really not even a shayla. Of a chitzayna saying ksiv hazai, so chitzayna who disrabu matayras. So it's actually interesting. This actually flips it on its head. Actually, the chiddush is not that penimus needs kibus; it's that chitzayna needs kibus, because the pasuk is actually going on penimus. So therefore, the chatas penimus certainly does need kibus. And therefore, if you only have one thing to include, we're going to include the chatas chitzayna. The pasuk is talking about things that you eat, and again, the penimus is not eaten. The kohanim do not eat that; they only eat by the chatas chitzayna. So inyan marika v'shetifa, avo inyan kibos asher yaziksiv. So you're right. The pasuk sounds like it's talking about ikr, but hachikamer says Rashi. Afal bi sheish devarim b'inyan she'ena medaber ela b'nechalais. Even though it's true. The pasuk does talk about certain karbanos which are eaten, but ma'nihu marika v'shtifa, dehi davka b'nechalais, the samach lekol zachar b'kohanim yoichalosa, miu inyan kibus echad nechalos echad penimus. So it's true. There may be certain aspects because of nechalos that we require you to do certain things to the carbon, namely you must do marika and shtifa. But which would not apply to an animal which is not eaten. But nonetheless, when it comes to kibus, since it is applicable to potentially to everything, so certainly that's talking about the penimus. Again, the starting point should be that the bigger chiddush is not the inner chatos, it's the outer one. So Tani, okay, fine. Flip it. So then why can't we then now include chatas oif? If we're excluding things like the chatas oif, maybe we should exclude the chatas chitzayna. So riba rachman is tyrus. So tyrus is actually coming to include the chatas chitzayna. So Umar Isa, so why would you say better to compare the chatas penimus, which for sure needs kibos, to the chatas chitzayna of a behema? Maybe you should include instead the chatas oif. Mustarber chatas behema have a riboy, as we said before. Shechein behema, both of them are actual animals, not birds. Shchitas, you do shchita, not malika. When it comes to these karbanos, it requires the shchita must be in south in the north. The kabbalas kli, the mikabo the kli, sharis. The keren, it must be application by the corner. The etzba with the finger. The chuda the karen, the etzba v'chuda, again on the edge. The ishim and the sacrificial parts are burned on the mizbeach. Obviously not a chatas of. Is not they don't have a mureim. Adarabba chatas of have a riba shechein hazak kamaisa. They both have hazak. So maybe we should compare the chatas penimus to the chatas oif, because both of them have hazah. There's this element of sprinkling which does not apply to the chatas chitzayna. So again, hanach nefishin. There's a lot more. So fine, that may be true, but that's okay. All right, fine. Weiter. So boy, and we're just gonna stay with that. Boy Rav Oven, chatas oif. When it comes to the chatas oif, which again we said does not need kibus, that everyone holds. Shehichnes dama b'tzavara. The dam entered directly from its neck. Bifnim, inside mahu. So let's look at Rashi. So let's say bein malika l'hazoya. Before you did the sprinkling, all was done was it was on the neck, and it went directly from the neck, bifnim, to the sprinkling. Would we say it's possible because of the pasuk v'chol chatas asher yuva, which the entire pasuk reads v'chol chatas asher yuva midama el ol moyed v'chaper b'kodesh lo se'achal b'eish desaref. This is any chatas which the dam is brought into the ol moed, you cannot eat it and it must be burned. So the question is, what is the status? Maybe the neck is not like being in a kli. So tzavara b'kli sharis dami a missile. Do we say that it's comparable, the fact that the dam is still on the neck, it's comparable to bringing dam into a kli shoris bifnim, which will passel it, says Rashi. Shahar lo huska b'kabolos kli. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't have kabolos kli, but it's on the neck. V'zehu kali, and therefore the neck is comparable to its kli, and therefore misel b'hachnosos adam shehechnisa b'kli lahechel, because it really had no business going bifnim. So just the fact that it went inside an area which wasn't supposed to go, just like a behema, if you would bring its dam into bifnim, which had no business going in there, that would passel it. Do we say the same thing when it comes to just bringing the bird in bifnim that way? O dilma kitsavar behema madama. It's comparable to like an animal. And Rashi says, "Ubehema shechnis lifnim mishenishchata v'hoitzia." Let's say for whatever reason you did the shchita, you brought the animal inside the hoitzia, then you quickly escorted the animal out. Then v'kibul dama lo mifsala. Then it will not passel. There's somehow you did the shchita, and for like a split second you brought it inside, then you brought it outside, but you did the kabolos dam in the right place outside. So there was never a moment that the dam was actually brought in b'kli sharis. The whole issue is if you bring dam bifnim, again we're talking about it was not supposed to be brought bifnim, and you brought it bifnim, what is the din? Is that going to passel? So the answer is, if you just brought the whole animal, a shechted animal, and then you took it out, and then you did the kabolos dam, that would not passel. You could use that dam. So maybe it's the same thing when it comes to a bird, because like just like you brought the whole animal in, you brought the whole bird in. Now, even though again there really is no kli, there's no kli by a bird, so the neck is its kli. So do we see that that's going to pass? Is that going to passel it being brought bifnim? So that's the kasha. So odilma kitsaver behema madama. So amar Rachmana v'loy b'sara, because the pasuk says there's a meat that if you bring the dam with its meat, it's not going to passel. So tashma. So we can prove it perhaps from here. It says pir chasa v'nichnasa. Let's say you have an animal that is shaking, which means it was moving. That's Rashi says is b'chatas oif katani law. When it turned to a chatas oif, and it was still after you did the malika, you brought it lifnim. The chazra ksheira. Now, apparently, that must be a raya, because the fact is that you brought it in, but it was still moving around. Ha hechnisa psula, which is mashma, and Rashi says v'kos hafadaitach mishum de maleha nichnasa. Like maybe it ran in by itself because it was moving. Like you didn't bring it, right? It just happened to be that just on its own, it just started. After it shechted it, you put it down, it could run. And let's say it somehow ran a bunch of feet into the bifnim, so that's not going to be a problem. Which is mashma, if you brought it in, then it would be a problem. So therefore, maybe it's a raya that it would passel. No, taimech gabi kachi kadashim degatani pirchas saviyatzel ledaraim. Let's say you did a shchita but saf, which you were supposed to do, and then it starts moving around and ends up going from the north where you did the shchita to the south. The chazra, and it returned back to the north. Kshera ha'hotzia psula. Is that mashma in that situation that if you would have taken it out and then brought it back in, that it would passel? It says Rashi, there's no din yaitse if you shechted it in the north and it went to the south, but then you physically brought it to the south for whatever reason, then you brought it back to the north. It's not going to passel it. Ella, that's not a raya. Ella ha yatatsa l'chutz. It's tzrichale. So the whole point is coming to exclude yatzul chutz. That if you brought it outside, it says Rashi, hadetani pirchasa yatzul chutz tzrichale. That if it ran outside, the gatani babahi pirchasa yatzul chutz la zara b'chazr psula. V'hil pirchasa yatzum yaleha denifsula b'yaitze. So it doesn't make any difference how it left the azara, even if you didn't bring it outside the azara, but if it was pirchas that just ran on its own, nonetheless, it's going to still passel. But it's not coming to teach us a diak, if you brought it bifnim. No, it's coming to tell you that dafka by pirchasa, Bifnim, it's not a problem. Because there's no mechitzos, there's no din yaitse, or by safan to daram, there's no din yaitse. Masha'ekin, when it comes to chutz, there is a din yaitse, and therefore it doesn't matter how it went out. That's not going to prove us anything over here. Okay, so that's in the boy the lishita. Next question. Boy Rabbi, nishmach al haritzba. So let's say you have dam that spilled onto the floor. The osva, and then you gathered it up. The question is, ma, what's the din with that dam? We know when it comes to a chatas oif, if it doesn't require kli sharis. The hilkach usvu v'kosher. Since there's no Kabbalah that applies at all by dam chatas oif, so if it's spilled into the ground, so what? So it's kosher. Dilma misul pasul be rachman kli sharis. The hilkach asul pasul. Maybe since there's no, you're not allowed to have a kli sharis, you can't scoop it up what do you mean you're scooping it up with your fingers? You're scooping it up, probably put into a kli, so therefore it'll pasul it. So that's the question. So if blood spills from a kli sharis, we know it's still good. It can't blood that just fell straight from the animal onto the ground isn't good. But if it fell into a kli sharis properly, it was a good kabbalah, and then it spilled, then you could pick it up. Now the question is, so what is the din by a bird if the blood fell directly from the neck? If it was in a kli sharis, even though zrika is direct without a kli, okay. So that's the kasha. So Rabba Tashma Yocheh Dam Chatas Oif Toin Kibos Tamad Lemer Zois. As we already said before, it does not require. Now V'Yisal Chadaitach Mifsul Pasul Bei Rachmana. If you want to tell me that the Torah is going to pasul in this case, typically the Ha Ifsale Nisla Ba'aver Kli. So why don't you just say that the dam should be pasul Ba'aver Kli, which basically what it's saying. Let's see if there's a Rashi on this. Explain this a little bit cleaner. So the question is, typically the little boy kibas b'lamiyot zois do isole dam mechi matal aver habeged. When the clear over here is talking about your beged, it went into your clothes. Yanon roy lahazabi inon the aver kli kli dami. So basically, if it hit your garment, so therefore. The problem is that's like Kabbalah's kli, if you will, on some level. It caught the blood, just like a kli would catch the blood. And if it's true that using a kli to scoop it up would pasul it, so then it's also be a davar pashut that obviously you don't need kibos to get the blood out because that blood's pasul on its own. You don't need a miyat from the pasuk. So apparently it's a riot. So Amarav. So typically the whole absolutely ba'aver kli, specifically of the beged. So Rav Huda Meridu Rav Yeshua b'mad b'kli b'tzavara. The blood goes directly into the clothes. Not that it fell ba'avir, but it actually went directly onto the clothes. So look in Rashi. Delo hoya al aviro. There was no airspace ad shenagaboy when it hit it. B'hayisrich zoisel miyute. So in other words, the idea of Kabbalah is the blood pours from the neck and it's caught into a kli. So apparently it's the same thing. If the blood spills and it gets caught onto the beged, so that's comparable to Kabbalah. But over here we're talking about, let's say he was doing the malika and his garment, while he was doing the malika, the blood went directly onto his clothes. So in that situation, there is no such thing as aver kli. Okay. So therefore, again, that's not a riot either. Okay, so let's look at question 14. B'gemari boy b'chatas oif eat savar ha'oif achar malika dinu kekli sharis olo l'may nafkamina. So he said, first of all, hachnis lifnim. If you brought the bird with the blood still on its neck, if it's like it's in a kli to pasul, or nishmach al ritzba basma. That the blood spilled directly onto the floor. But by a behema, if it spills from a kli sharis, it's okay. So maybe here as well. Okay. Boy mine levi nitas mibeged lebeged mahu. Let's say the blood went not just onto the Kohen's garment, but then from garment A to garment B. What's the status with that second garment? Do we say that we only focus on the first garment or not? It says Rashi, it's worse than when it was poured from a kli onto the floor. You've also gathered and afterwards went on the beged. The hasam kivan de kashul zrika. Over there, since it's kashul zrika royal hazak kriyabe al habeged the eskuke iskuk lakibus. You're supposed to wash it right away. Archi mataris hazah. So it's already removed from hazah. Lo kriyan be royal hazah. It's no longer, that blood is not fit to be sprinkled. The little boy kibus high acharon. Therefore, the second one may not need kibus. Okay, that's the as far as machlokas. Kibus. So this is the question, and what the din is that yes, it will need kibus, the second garment. If you gather it and it's kosher, that's fine. He holds that, and this is going back all the way to 13c, that if you have a situation where it was kosher, then it became possible, it had a shasa kosher, then it does need kibus. And this is an interesting shita. So therefore, says Rashi, we're going to see this later on, shasa kosher v'zrikam nifsala dama toin kibus. V'hai hari mitchilasu b'kli, was originally in a kli, niskaba v'haisel shasa kosher. V'achach nifsal b'nefilas al beged harishain, and it fell onto the first garment, and therefore because of that, it does require kibus because that is shasa kosher, which goes all the way back to question 13c, which again our Mishnah seem to be clear that in either situation, it would, when it comes to whether it has a shasa kosher, chatas psula is doesn't matter even if it does have a shasa kosher. It says clearly in our Mishnah that ein domaton kibus, but that's only the Mishnah. However, we now see it's actually a machlokas, and therefore difficult question. But 13c is a machlokas because we see Rabbi Akiva is choylik. He disagrees on Sadi Beis and Beis. So that's the reason why it's a machlokas. That is a difficult question because you have to not just remember the Mishnah, which is probably what's ingrained in your mind. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Let's maybe see a question or two. Question TA12. Yochi hedam chatas oif toin kibus tamul number zois. Let's say the kli shar is possible oif. If in fact the kli shar is possible oif, so then my sakadaita to toin kibus. Why would you think it needs kibus, right? As we said before in the question, right? Because of Aver Kli, which is basically what's being asked over here. And the answer is the Iri bit Madbik Pli bit Savara, that the dam went directly from the neck onto the beged, and therefore there was no situation, rather, that we're dealing with of Avir Kli. It's not Avir Kli because it went directly onto the garment. Question TB15. Yochehidam Chatas Oiv Ton Kibus Amazois. Let's say the Kli Sharis B'oiv Amai Salkataita Ton Kibus. And this I wrote incorrectly. Adkan.